we go. There we go. I'm a fucking idiot. There we go. I'm a fucking idiot. I'm a fucking idiot. Voila. So, well, allow me to start again with my mic working this time. Hello everyone and welcome to my stream. I am Lockfun and today we're gonna read a bit of fanfiction. This is a project that is intended to last quite a while, if I stick to it, which isn't guaranteed at all. But I do intend on doing my best to do this light reading with you the best of my ability. So I've been talking in for a little while in complete void because my mic was turned off. Those things happen. Alright. So, a little bit of explanation here that I just did and will redo. We are reading Linked in Life and Love, which is a fanfic for RWBY. RWBY being an American show about, well, girls who do cool fights with cool weapons that are also guns. If you haven't seen it, well, I would very much advise you to just watch the first volume at the very least. That's the only thing required to have an inkling of what is happening in this fanfic specifically. There is a lot of winks and information from other volumes as well, but they're explained by the author, or if they are not explained by the author, it's not detrimental to the story. You will have to suffer my terrible, terrible French accent during the entirety of the reading. However, if you wish to correct me on pronunciation and the like, you can do so. I encourage you to do so, because I'm also here to learn. And I have no problem with you telling me that I did not pronounce a word correctly. We will do pauses and moments where I will drink a bout of water or something of the like. And I have the comments of the stream right under my noses. So if you talk to me, I can read and I can answer. There's no problem with that. I have no problem with interrupting the flow of the story from time to time. Alright. So, this is a polyfic, which means that, well, there's a... Well, let's start from the start. This is a romance and action fic. Basically, the author started this by simply building a relationship between four characters, the four main characters, save Ruby and Yang, who are sisters and share, simply. If polyamory is not a thing you like, well, stick by anyway, because when I say this is a good story, I say this is a fucking good story. It derails the canon deliciously. It is, in my opinion, better than canon by a large margin, and it is also hilarious from time to time. So yeah, do not hesitate a single second to at least try a few chapters before throwing the towel. I promise it's worth it. It really is. Now, seeing as I'm ready to start, we'll start simply by a simple summary. And before we start, I'd like also to add that I've got the express authorization by Omega Infinity themselves to read the story in live. I asked them directly. I have the messages here somewhere, if you give me a second to show them to you. Where is it? It should be around here somewhere. There. I believe it is in general. Yep, I have this that I can open in Brother. I'm going to have to change a few things over. Give me just a second. Capture window. Yep. Perfect. Perfect. We're going to do this correctly, please. I said okay. There you go. I have. Well, they're like the first message. Allow me to find that back. Allow me to find that back. Where is it? You know what? Screw it. Screw it. Screw it. Screw it. We're gonna do that in other ways. So there you go. There you go. There you go. Let me just check that. Yep, reading is still fine. We're simply going to go in my dashboard very fast. We're going to go in inbox, and we're going to go right back here, 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 all the way down in the commentaries. Perfect. There you go. And now I'm going to switch here and here. There. I did ask specifically if I could do this, and I was given an okay. So I'm not stealing anything. The author is entirely okay with me using this to do a live stream, and it has been discussed before. That's all I wanted to say. As you can see, I'm not as used as live streaming as I'd like. Okay, now we're going to get that right back in. Perfect. Okay. Now. The summary. We'll start there before I digress even more. A single intimate night together, and it leads to so much more. Follow as Team RWBY dive into a relationship none of them could have imagined, trying to make sense of their new situation, as well as deal with the reaction of the people around them. All the while facing white fang drama, family secrets, and most devastating of all, homework. Pollination with no enabler. Or there are so many pollination stories that were nothing but smut that I wanted to try and make one with an actual full-length story, and I somehow obliterated the RWBY canon in the process. Whoops! And that's a very accurate summary. I've read it multiple times, I enjoy it tremendously, and it's awesome. Now, without further ado, Chapter 1, Warmth. Blake squinted her eyes against the sudden onslaught of lights. She flung her arm over her face, trying to chase away the evil glare that had woken her so suddenly. Her cat ears flicked as a small breeze passed over it, the instinctive motion sending a sudden shot of pain. Ah, dust my head, she thought, through the dull ache in her skull. She moved her arm back down, grimacing as she did. Why am I so sore? Her ears flicked again as another breeze drifted past. She blinked blearily, the blurry image of Yang's bunk above her slowly coming into focus. She turned her head to the side, regretting it instantly as the unforgiving morning sun blazed at her from the window. She threw up her hand to protect her eyes. What What happened last night? She tried to dredge her memories of the previous day, her pounding head not helping matters. Another breeze made her ears flick again, much to her annoyance. Okay, it was the last day of classes for the week. Yang suggested we do something fun in Vale. Bright lights, a carnival? No, an arcade. Ruby made me play that dancing game. Wise kept losing at skee-ball, got flustered. Her lips curled up at the thought of the Ice Queen, red-faced and flustered at failing at a children's game. Yang tried punching machine, broke the punching machine, argued with the owner, got us thrown out, then Blake frowned, her mind getting foggier as she dug further into the night. Her ears flicked again at another breeze. I'm going to change just a thing about my setup, if you don't mind. Sorry for the interruption and the noise. I'm going to remove my keyboard and take my tablet right here with me in front of me, which will be much, much more enjoyable for everyone. So, where was I? Then Blake frowned, her mind getting foggier as she dug further into the night. Her ears flinked again at another breeze. We went back to our room, still early. Ruby suggested movie night, some action flick. Yang's choice, dumb but fun. Then another breeze, another flick of the ear. Then it got warm, uncomfortable, breeze, flick. I was scared I couldn't find breeze, flick. Velvet, infirmary, lockdown, burning, flick, breeze. Ruby, Yang, Wise, cheers, lips, breeze, flick. Soft hands, breeze, flick, 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 flick. Blake's eyes shot open. Breeze? She looked at the window. It was shut. Not a breeze? Very slowly, Blake turned her head around, her amber eyes shutting tight as if not seeing the source of the breeze would make it disappear. She felt hair against her forehead. With all the willpower she could muster, Blake cracked a single eye, just a sliver open. A sea of yellow took up her vision. With growing dread, Blake opened her eyes fully. Yang Shalong lay beside her, one arm folded behind her as a makeshift pillow. Her head was tilted toward Blake. The unkept mane that was her hair splayed out in all directions. Every breath of her silent snoring sent small puffs of air gusting into Blake's hair, making her ears twitch before she quickly fold them down against her head. Yang, but why is she in my bed and why? As Blake's eye drifted down Yang's body, her train of thought came to a screeching halt. The first thing that caught her attention was the complete lack of the loose orange tank top Yang always wore to bed. The second was the head of white hair laying on her uncovered chest. Wisely, heir to the most powerful dust company on the planet, was snoring softly with a content smile on her face as if the prowler beneath her was the most comfortable pillow in the world, and, judging from her bare shoulder, she was in the same state of dress, or lack thereof, as the blonde. Wise? But she and Yang in my bed? But why? How? The cat furnace heart sped up as reality came crashing down on her, the pieces quickly completing a puzzle she really didn't want to solve. But it wasn't until she started taking deep, anxiety-filled breath. Oh, small mistake here. There's a repeated word. Deep anxiety-filled breath that the final damning piece clicked into place. Why is it so hard to breathe? Swallowing her dread, Blake hesitantly looked down, already knowing what she'd see. A head of black hair, the tip dyed red, resting on her bare chest. And as the final nail in the coffin, she could see, as well as feel, that neither of them had a speck of clothing on. Of clothing on. Blake took a full minute to take in her three nude teammates, all crammed together on a little double bed. For a final confirmation, Blake took a small sniff of the air. Yep. What the hell? The previous night. Oh, Dust, is this for real? Blake pressed her knuckles against her lip, trying to keep from bursting out laughing. Things had started simple enough. Jim Ruby, having changed into sleepwear, was sitting on Weiss's bed as a scroll projected a movie against the far wall. Blake sat against the wall, Yang at her side. Weiss sat at the edge of the bed, where Ruby lay on her stomach beside her, chin propped up on folded arms. It looked to be a rather normal end to a good day. But as soon as Yang's choice of movie started playing, all four girls had alternated between eye-rolling, groaning, or just outright laughing at the testosterone-fueled explosion fest before them. To be fair, to the average person it was probably an okay, if silly, representation of what the world of hunters was like. But to four huntresses in training who fought actual grim on a regular basis, it was outright ludicrous. Come on, Yang. It's not that bad. Yang laughed out loud. Ruby, he just drove a car out of a plane, bounced it off the back of a Nevermore, then drove it into another plane. While on fire, Blake added. While on fire! Yang echoed, descending back into laughter. Where do they come up with this stuff? Weiss mumbled, trying so hard to keep a straight face and failing miserably. Blake smiled, and not just from the color commentary her team was providing. Hard to believe that only a year ago she'd been running from both White Fang and the authorities, trying desperately to scrap up the money for Beacon's entrance fee. Now she looked around, and she had true friends, people who stood by her. Oh, I call bullcrap. Fire doesn't work that way. Dysfunctional though as they may be. No, I'm sorry, lady. You can't outrun an explosion. You're freaking dead. I can, Ruby said, looking back. Yeah, you can, little sis. I don't see any rose petal behind Miss Bandana head here. Blake let out a small laugh at the sister's antics. Judging from her shaking shoulders, Weiss was about to lose it. After a few more minutes of gunshots and explosion, and poorly written one-liners, Yang suddenly clutched her stomach, doubling over from laughter. I can't. I can't. She was laughing so hard that she fell over, handing in Blake's lap. Blake rolled her eyes. Yang had exactly no respect for personal space, a trait she shared with her sister. After so long keeping to herself, it had taken Blake a while to get used to the sudden hugs and shoulder punches that continually subjected her to. But she was starting to reach the point where she accepted them as commonplace. A sudden burst of heat went across Blake's chin, rather low but noticeable. Blake ignored it, chalking it up to the blonde's higher than normal temperature. After a few seconds, though, she noticed the heat increasing steadily. She frowned, looking down to see if Yang's semblance might be to blame, but no, there was no yellow glow, just a mass of blonde hair, drifting and ghosting across her skin, tickling her thighs like tiny strands of silk. Yang's cool cheek against her leg. Wait, cool? Yang was never cool. She was always warm, much more than normal. She always felt like she had been in the sun all day, so why... Blake froze as the blonde kept laughing, her cool breath blowing across her bare legs. Oh no. Sorry. No. Oh no. Is that tonight? Blake, Blake quickly counted the days, ignoring the scorching feeling across her skin. She cursed mentally. Damn, it is! Okay, no big problem. I just got to get to my bag. The movie stretched on for an ah. The movie stretched on for an agonizing 10 minutes. Yang's head staying in Blake's lap as she couldn't stop laughing at the cheesy action got worse and worse as the second ticked by. Blake tried to ignore her, and the feeling that she was suddenly aware of, praying that no one would notice her sudden stiff posture. Finally, after a few parting one-liners, the screen faded to black as the credit rolled. Okay, I think that's all the stupidity I can handle for one night, Wise said as she clicked the scroll off, a sharp smirk betraying her attempt at decorum. Oh, admit it, Snow Queen, Yang said as she sat up, thanks dust, rubbing tears from her eyes. You were enjoying yourself. Weiss let out a huff as she stood up from the bed. The fact that I found the movie hilariously moronic does not change the fact that it was still moronic. Exactly! The best kind of bad movies is when it's so bad it's good, Yang said proudly as she got up, stretching her arms as she did so. I still don't think it was that terrible, Ruby mumbled as she pulled herself up. Ruby, there was a giant robot snake that shot laser from its tail. I thought it was kinda cool, she grumbled as she climbed up to her bunk, rope creaking ominously as she did. As her teammate continued to bicker and joke, Blade made her move, moving quickly while her team was distracted. She made it to her bunk and grabbed her bag from where it hooked on the wall. She started riffling through it, looking, searching. Come on, where is it? She thought desperately, feeling warmer by the second. Where? Aha! Really flooded through her as she found the tiny orange bottle at the bottom of her bag. She gave it a little shake. She shook it harder. Blake stared down at the silent bottle with wide eyes. Empty? How can it be empty? I refilled it just last. She looked up in horror. Last month, when her friends found out she was a faunus, when she disappeared for almost a week hiding from them, when she spent so much time worrying about her team and the White Fang, she forgot to get a refill. Blake stared at the empty bottle, cold dread filling her just as equally as the uncomfortable warmth. This is bad, this is very bad. I can't, no. Just calm down and think. Okay, I'm empty, but maybe some other funnels on campus would let me borrow some of theirs? Just once. Maybe Velvet. Yeah, Velvet's nice. She'd understand. Wait, no, her team's away on a mission. Damn. Oh, Sun. That'd be awkward. I know it'll help. Except I don't know where his room is. Maybe the infirmary? I'm sure they'd have some, but I doubt the faculty would just give me some. Blake, you okay? Blake flinched, dropping the bottle back into her bag. She turned to see Yang right next to her, looking concerned. Yeah, I'm fine, Yang. Why do you ask? She replied, willing herself not to stutter. Well, you've been staring into your bag for 5 minutes. What, did someone steal your wallet? No, Blake practically hear the light bulb go off in her head. She plastered on as convincing a smile as she could muster as she spoke. Actually, yeah, I think I left it back in the cafeteria. I'm just going to run down and grab it real quick. Blake moved to the door before Yang could respond and pulled the handle. It didn't budge. What? She tried it again to no effect. She jerked it in panic back and forth to no avail. She turned around, finding her whole team staring at her. Ignoring her reddening cheeks, she asked, Did one of you lock the door? Yang and Ruby shook their heads, confused. Weiss took a step forward to the door, scroll open. Blake took a step out of the way, leaning back as to not brush up against her. Weiss glanced at her out of the corner of her eyes before waving a scroll over the door lock. Beep beep. A deep note came from the scroll. The word rejected flashing across the screen in big red letters. Weiss stared at the screen incredulously. Rejected? Why am a remnant? A video suddenly opened itself on Weiss's scroll. The image of Glinda Goodwitch appeared, looking stern as always. Attention student! Due to a security threat on the school grounds, we are placing Beacon Academy on lockdown. All students are to not leave their dorm rooms for the remainder of the night. Any students currently outside their rooms are to make their way to the nearest public location, such as the cafeteria or training room. Have your IDs ready if you are in this situation. You will be informed when the lockdown has been lifted. That is all. Team Ruby stared at Weiss's scroll, confused and, in a certain Faunus's case, terrified. Lockdown? Weiss muttered. So what? They lock us in a room? Yang asked. Can they even do that? Apparently. What do you think's going on? Ruby wondered. As her teammate talked, Blake felt the world fall on her shoulder. She felt her inside ice over, an iceberg in a boiling sea. I'm locked in? No way to stop it? Blake looked around the room at search of her teammates as they spoke. Ruby was hanging off of her bunk, animatedly stating her theory for the lockdown, obviously influenced by the films they'd just seen. Yang laughing at her ideas as Weiss shook her head in exasperation. Blake swallowed through her dry throat, slowly making her way to her bed. She pushed away the burning feeling, the ache that had now appeared. Sitting down, she reached over her table and picked up the book she'd been reading the last few nights. With conscious effort, she leaned against the wall, opened the book, and tried to get comfortable. It's just one night. I can do this. I can make it through. One night. Just this one. Single time. With no problem. I am a huntress. I fight monsters on a daily basis. I can survive. One night. Just got to make it through. One night. I can do this. I can do this. A frantically twitching bow said otherwise. 1 hour later. She was going to die. Blake had her book close to her face, her hands shaking, her breath choppy. She kept her eyes glued to the pages, rereading the same words over and over again, unable to focus. She swallowed, before again glancing up at the room. Weiss sat at their shared desk, pencil scratching across paper as she worked on the day's homework. Back straight, posture relaxed, her head tilting back and forth slightly as she alternated between reading a textbook and writing down notes. Ruby was doing the same at Weiss's insistence, though with less success. She was sitting cross-legged on her bunk, surrounded by books and binders. She furrowed her brow at the book in her hand, chewing on her pencil nervously. Any other night, a normal sight in the Team Ruby dorm. But for Blake, it was anything but. Her senses were on overdrive. Every sight, sound, and sense screamed at her, drawing her attention. The way Weiss's hair drifted over her eyes as she moved her head, the delicate way she moved her fingers as she turned the pages of her book, the slight grinding sound of Ruby's teeth biting into the soft wood of her pencil, her tongue trailing across her lips as she stuck it out in concentration. But the most distracting, the most tormenting came from the small trails of steam floating from under the bathroom doors. With her already strong hearing increased, she could clearly hear Yang's quiet humming, her fingers squeaking through her soapy hair, the near silent beating of water against her soft, wet skin. Blake slammed her book shut, eyes clenched and teeth grit, banishing the image from her mind. No, stop it. Control. I am in control. I am in control. She took a deep breath and held it, clenching her hands into fists. It hurt. What had started as warmth had become a fire, a raging inferno that was screaming, begging to be quenched. It was like someone had replaced her blood with lit fire dust, and she was burning from the inside out. And dust, it was painful. She was at the point that it took all of her willpower not to scream in agony. She only barely felt the sharp twinges as her clenched fist dug her nail into her palm. I am in control. I am in control. I am. Blake? Blake's amber eyes snapped open at the very sudden, very close voice, and she stared directly into the bright silver orbs right in front of her. And that's over with chapter 1, with only a few mistakes and stutter on my part, which I'm sure I will correct in time. Alright, I think that each and every chapter I finish, I'm going to drink a bit, because it's important. Perfect. Now, let's get back to it. Okay. Chapter 2. Red. Something was wrong with Blake. For the last hour, Ruby had been trying to understand the obscure notes of her history homework. Normally, history was one of her best subjects, despite the rather obscure points Professor Oobleck always asked for in the homework, but tonight she just couldn't focus. Ruby knew she wasn't really the best choice for team leader, despite her friends telling her otherwise. She wasn't as smart as Weiss, or calm and collected like Blake, or even as confident as Yang. She had trouble focusing, acting a bit impulsive, and nearly always missed the point of whatever she was being told. And yet, everyone, from her teammate to Team Juniper to the headmaster himself, all believed that she was the one who should lead, despite her thought to the contrary. She didn't get it. She was grateful for their faith in her, truly she was, but she didn't get it. But Ruby Rose was not a quitter. If everyone thought she could be a leader, then gosh darn it, she was going to be the best leader she could, even if her book smarts were a bit lacking. Yes, Ruby knew she was lacking in some areas, but she was determined to make it up for it in others. And the very best way she could think of was by knowing her team. Yang was easy. Ruby had known her big since forever, really. What she liked, what she hated, favorite places to go, things to do, even the things she feared the most, which Sister Law dictated she never revealed to anyone, ever. Weiss was a bit tougher. Any and all inquiries about her family brought up the wall, as Ruby had started to call it when Weiss' voice got low and her eyes hardened. All Ruby knew was that she had an older sister who she didn't talk to very much, but seemed to make Weiss a little sad when she talked about her, and her father, who Ruby got the feeling was a man she never wanted to meet. Her mother hadn't been mentioned once, which told Ruby that the woman was either worse than which told Ruby that the woman was either worse than Weiss's father, or was dead, neither something Ruby wanted to dwell on. Aside from family, however, Ruby had actually discovered a surprising amount about her partner. Mainly, Weiss had a love for rather simple things despite her upper-class upbringing. Small things like movies, window shopping, or even sweets. Once, on a trip to Vale, Ruby had dragged Weiss into an ice cream parlor because she was hungry. The look on Weiss's face when she bit into what to Ruby was just a regular vanilla ice cream cone eyes big and practically sparkling, would be etched into Ruby's mind as one of the cutest things she had ever seen. Not that Weiss would ever admit it. Come to think of it, maybe it was because she grew up in a high society that she took pleasure in things Ruby considered normal. Weiss also valued truth and honesty despite her evasion on topics she didn't want to talk about, something Ruby would have to talk to her about at some point. She was very slow to trust people, but seemed to be rather loyal once you had earned her trust. However, she was very unforgiving if she believed that trust had been misplaced, and a bit impulsive when it came to condemning said alleged trust breaker. Look no further than the thing with Blake a few weeks ago. Speaking of Blake's, however, Speaking of Blake, however, that was the one that troubled Ruby a bit. Ruby knew even less about her past than she did Weiss. She was a former member of the White Fang, and that was it. No family, no former friends, places she'd lived or hung out at, nothing. The one time Ruby had asked about her family, all she received was a brief, blank stare before Blake put on a rather forced smile and gently brushed her off. However, Ruby had managed to piece a few things together about Blake as a person. She liked seafood, for now obvious reason, but also had a taste for sweet fruits like apples and tangerines. She liked athletics, mostly things to do with acrobatics or fast footwork. Got the proof on that one at the arcade. Blake whipped the floor with a at that dance rhythm game and seemed to enjoy it. She preferred the peace and quiet, though. Ah, she preferred the peace and quiet, though was willing to put up with a surprise amount of noise around her to enjoy a good book. She was always very calm, very mellow, and seemed to not let anything bother her for too long. That was what made Ruby worried. That was how Blake had acted for a few months she had known her. The only time she had lost that cool was a fight with Weiss, and even then Blake had seemed to return to her normal after all was said and done. So what was wrong with her now? Ruby looked down at Blake for a bunk. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Just quiet old Blake, her nose buried in a book. But as Ruby had noted, something seemed off. The first hint was just after the movie had ended, as she and Yang had bickered with Weiss over the merit of watching bad movies for the fun of it. Ruby had seen Blake move toward a bag. Not that strange, except for how stiff Blake seemed to be moving, like she was on a mission. Then there was her just staring into space for like 5 minutes afterwards, and then the thing with the wallet. Ruby frowned. Blake lied. She had her wallet when they were at the arcade. Blake saw it when Blake swapped some lien for game tokens, and she never went to the cafeteria after that. They all went back to the dorm as a group. Ruby stared at Blake, looking over her. Blake reading a book was normal. This was not. When she read, Blake usually held her book a bit down so she could always see her. So you could always see her eyes trailing across the pages. This time, she held the book higher so her face was blocked. Her shoulders were tense, and she seemed to be clutching the book rather hard, judging by the light shakes in her hands. A sharp movement caught Ruby's attention. At first, she thought she had imagined it, but then it happened again. Every few seconds, Blake's ever-present bow would twitch sharply. Ruby was really worried now. Even though they all now knew Blake was a Faunus, said Faunus never took off that bow. Ruby had seen her cat ears only once, very briefly, that night on the docks, and never since. Heck, she doubted Yang or Weiss had seen them at all yet. Knowing that they were there, Ruby had gone rather impressed with how Blake was able to keep them so still all the time, never letting another in on the secret. Which was what made their frantic twitching now all the more concerning. Ruby chewed on her pencil nervously. Her eyes turned to her partner, calmly doing homework with an ease that made Ruby slightly envious. The leader put down her textbook and pencil, and she made to get down from her bunk. Maybe Wise slam. Ruby jumped at the silence as the silence was shattered by a large bang, nearly falling off her bed. The noise startled Wise into dropping her pencil. They both snapped their heads toward the noise. Ruby felt I can't talk. Sorry. Ruby felt her heart clench. Ruby felt her heart clench. There, I did it. Blake had slammed her book shut, dropping it in the process, giving Ruby a clear view of her fondest friend. Her hands were clenched into fists so tight her knuckles were white. Her face was very red, thin lines of sweat trailing down her forehead. Her eyes were shut tight, and Ruby couldn't tell if the moisture in the area around them was more sweat or the start of tears. Her mouth was twisted into a pained grimace. Ruby quickly turned to Wise, who returned a look with one of confusion and concern. As Wise stood up, Ruby leapt off of her bunk and dashed across the room, stopping right in front of Blake. She's shaking, Ruby noticed with a frown. Ruby bent down slightly. Blake? Blake's eyes snapped open. Ruby? Ruby frowned at her confused tone. Blake, are you okay? You don't look so well. Blake stared before flinching back, eyes screwed shut. I'm fine, Ruby. She was clenching her teeth. Just a little warm. She's lying again. A bead of sweat slid down Blake's forehead. On a whim, Ruby wiped it away with the back of her hand. Her eyes widened as she held it there, Blake's eyes flying open at the contact. Blake, you're burning up. I think you have a fever or something. Ruby stopped as Blake's wide eyes slowly slid closed. Ruby opened her mouth to say something when she felt Blake lean forward, pressing her forehead against her hand. Blake? Blake ignored her, dripping her head a bit, her hair touching Ruby's hand. Ruby grew more confused as Blake started to rub against her hand, pushing it higher with her hairline. Blake, are you feeling... She felt silent as Blake dipped her head farther, a small smile forming on her lips. Ruby nearly gasped as her finger brushed against the bow, the knot holding it in place loosening. The leader was at loss for words as Blake rubbed 1, 2, 3 more times until one side of the bow fell back and Ruby felt soft fur beneath her fingers. Oh, was all she could manage. Wow! Sorry. Wow. Ruby turned her head to find Wise right behind her, her pale blue eyes glued to Blake's revealed cat ear, singular. Blake kept rubbing until she let out a small huff, a smile faltering as she began rubbing slightly harder. I think I'm going to redo that whole sentence. Blake kept rubbing until she let out a small huff, her smile faltering as she began rubbing slightly harder against Ruby's limp hand. Does she want me to do something? With no other ideas, Ruby lifted her hand slightly as she scratched behind Blake's ear. Blake shuddered suddenly before relaxing. Ruby felt Blake start to vibrate, and a deep rumble filled the air. Is she purring? Wise said in a stunned whisper. No. Ruby was just as shocked. She scratched harder, and the rumbling grew louder. Ruby felt the corner of her mouth perk up. Is this a funniest thing? She wanted someone to scratch her ears? No, that can't be it. Why should Why would she feel this warm? For about a minute, Ruby stood there scratching Blake's ear, the rest of the bow coming loose. Weiss watched on, entranced by the spectacle before her. Just as soon as it had started, Blake stopped purring. She lifted her head, Ruby's hand still curled around her ear. I guess she wants to talk now? Blake? Blake opened her eyes, and Ruby felt her heart jump. Blake's yellow eyes were narrowed like a cat's, her irises now narrow slits. She smiled softly. Blake, are you okay? Blake lunged. It took Ruby's brain a few seconds to process exactly what had happened as she slowly registered the flushed face taking up her vision, the soft but forceful feeling of pressing against her lips. The rough textures running over her tongue. Oh, Blake is kissing me. Blake is kissing me! Ruby felt struck. Part of her was screaming to push Blake away, to stop this, whatever it was, but another part thought that it felt kinda nice. Ruby's eyes slowly slid closed, Blake giving a hum of contemplation as she leaned into the kiss. Really nice. What the hell? Ruby jumped back, feeling like a bucket of ice water had been splashed over her. She opened her eyes to see Blake still in front of her, blinking rapidly as her slitted eyes morphed back to normal. She stared at Ruby, confused, before gasping, eye widening. She gasped silently before her head snapped to the side. Ruby followed suit and nearly jumped back again. Yang stood in the bathroom door, sleepwear on, hair wet, hands clenched, and eyes with a murderous shade of red. When she got no answer, she slowly marched forward, gaze locked on the terrified Faunus, Weiss wisely getting out of her way. I repeat, what the hell? Blake's eyes flicked between Yang, Ruby, and a thoroughly confused Weiss as she sputtered for a response. What? Yang raised her arm a bit, looking about ready to throw a punch. Ruby's frazzled mind had finally caught up with the situation, and she was about to jump in front of Yang, hoping to give Blake a chance to explain. She can explain, right? I mean, there's a reason she just kissed me, right? When Blake beat her to it. Just as she had a month ago, Blake phased out of existence as a black blur shot across the room. The slam of the bathroom door echoed through the room, the click of the lock following soon after. And that's chapter 2. Moment for drinking more. Gosh. I had forgotten how speaking that much longer and with this much concentration needed some good water. God, I felt parched at the end there. Alright, that's fine. Let's continue. Right. That will be a third chapter. Just wait a second, I'm going to consult. How long have I been? It's been an hour. I think I can do 2 or 3, so that should be around maybe 6 or 7 chapters, maybe more, I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, moving on. Chapter 3, Cold. Blake pressed herself against the door, gasping in steam-filled air as her heart pounded in her chest. Part of it was from the fear that Yang looked so pissed she might actually kill her. But most of it was from the crushing reality of what she'd just done. I kissed Ruby. I just kissed her right in front of Weiss, And Yang saw. As her breathing quickened, she ran her hand through her hair right over her ear. My ears. Her hand flew to the top of her head, clamping down on the damning appendages. My bow. That's right, Ruby. No, I made Ruby. That mean what? That means what? It's Yang too. They saw. Blake slid down the door, the truth sinking in. Tears trailed down her face. I lost it. I lost control. Blake's eyes scoured the bathroom. No window or other doors, no vent she could squeeze through. A small, humorless laugh passed her lips. I can't run this time. There's nowhere to go. I I have to tell them. They're going to know. They're going to look at me like, she sobbed, like an animal. Like I'm an animal. It was still there. Even now, the fire, the heat, the pain, it surged through her. Except now it wasn't a fantasy that fed the flames. It was a single, very real moment that replayed in her mind. The moment Ruby's hand touched her skin, it was all over. After 1 hour, just damn it, just 1 hour, of holding everything in, Ruby's touch was like a wrecking ball to her psyche. Her mind had gone blank, instinct taking over. All she could think about was Ruby's cool hand on her skin, the feeling of her fingers brushing through her hair, and when Ruby scratched her ears, I purred. Blake buried her face in her hands. She hadn't purred since she was a child, back when the white thing actually stood for something. She couldn't have been older than Dust 7, 8? Young enough that a faunus could get away with acting on their more instinctual feelings. That had stopped once life forced her to grow up. Yet, in her pent-up state, all it took Ruby was a brush of her hand and a few scratches to turn her into a damn house cat. She could have lived with that. If it had just stopped at the cat and the purring, Blake might have been able to salvage the situation, pass it off as some whim that had struck her. But no, oh no, that wasn't good enough for the cat. She had a taste for affection, and the greedy little feline had wanted more. I kissed Ruby, just blitzed her, right there in the dorm. I didn't ask, I didn't want her, I just went for it. Why? Why did I do that? And why did she kiss me back? Blake smiled, despite herself. For a brief moment, she had felt it, the slight pressure as Ruby had leaned into the kiss, and for just a second, so sudden she thought she'd imagined it, the inferno had died down, faded to a comfortable warmth. She'd felt content. And then Yang tried to take her head off. Blake's heart beat faster as she recalled that moment. The confusion, the horror, and then the pure, unadulterated fear as Yang marched toward her, eyes ablaze. Oh, sorry, my actual cat is doing something forbidden. Sorry about that. Where was I? Blake's heart beat faster as she recalled him. No, nope, I already did that. And I marched toward her, her eyes ablaze. Those eyes, so furious, boring into her soul as her form shook with rage, her wet hair glowing, her clothes hugging her damn form, showing off every curve. Blake slammed her fist to her head. Damn it! Even terrified, that damn wasp screwed with her head. It was getting unbearable. She was burning, aching, begging for it to stop, only for her body to hit further. A whimper escaped her lips, her breathing growing ragged. I can't lose it again. Have to explain. Need to focus. Her eyes drifted across the bathroom, finally resting on the shower. Need to cool off. Weiss had given up. What had been a surprisingly nice evening with her team had devolved into utter chaos in under an hour. Things had been so quiet, peaceful even, as she had simply focused on her schoolwork, even getting Ruby to do the same for once. Blake was reading a book while Yang was in the shower, unable to annoy her for the time being. It was nearly perfect. Then Blake slammed her book shut. Weiss felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Had Blake looked like that the whole night? Ruby was right. She looked sick, downright feverish. Weiss had actually pulled out a scroll, ready to call the infirmary for help. Even with a lockdown, someone could have done something. But then things took a turn for the crazy. The moment Ruby touched Blake's forehead, it was like she'd become a different person, or rather, a different creature. Weiss had been around cats before. Her sister, Winter, had owned one for a number of years before it had passed away, so she recognized what was doing. The gentle rubbing against Blake's hand, the not so subtle request for affection. Well, actually, she hadn't recognized it at first, not until she saw the ears. That had been a shocker. Weiss knew they were there, but actually seeing them, two large, fur-covered cat ears poking out of Blake's hair, it suddenly made things seem a bit more real. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, and she tried desperately to quash down the many memories of his rant and venting. She very nearly said something, a biting retort on the situation which, in hindsight, would have been rather rude and insensitive. It was a knee-jerk reaction, a byproduct of living in the Schnee household, to belittle anything beyond the status quo. She still had work on. Fuck. Sorry. She still had to work on that. At the sight of Ruby scratching Blake's cat ear almost made her say something she knew she would have regretted, and she would have said it, too, if Blake hadn't stopped purring. Blake couldn't help but stare as Blake rumbled, a smile gracing her lips. Weiss felt her lips quirk upward a bit at the sight. Between the purring, her smile, and the almost kitten-like way she was acting, Blake actually looked kind of cute. Weiss felt her cheek warm at the thought. She's probably older than me, she chided herself. I'm sure she wouldn't appreciate such a comment, or would she be offended if I didn't find such action completely normal? She pushed her thought aside, working out her confusion feeling about Faunus. God damn it. Working out her confusing feelings about Faunus could wait another day. They still needed to figure out why Blake was acting this way. She was feverish, if Ruby's exclamation was to be believed, and was most definitely acting out of character, even if her actions seemed rather harmless. She's kissing Ruby. She's kissing Ruby! Weiss felt her mouth fall open, her mind grinding to a halt as she watched the impossible happen. Her cheeks reddened as Blake eagerly pressed her lips against the smaller girl. Ruby seemed just as stunned as Weiss, just standing there frozen. Just as the thought crossed Weiss's mind that she should help her partner, stop Blake from doing whatever. God damn it. To stop Blake from doing what Ruby clearly wanted no part of. Is she kissing back? Weiss' jaw fell further as her face grew redder as Ruby leaned forward, her jaw working slowly as she pressed closer to the funnus. When Blake let out a small hum that sounded suspiciously like a moan, Weiss's brain finally shut down. What little faculties she had left screamed at Weiss to turn away, if for nothing else than to give a teammate's privacy, but she couldn't look away. She watched them kiss for what felt like an eternity, her heart rate increasing by the minute. What the hell? Well, that snapped a. Sorry. I'm Sorry. Yeah, let's go back to it. Well, that snapped her out of it. Weiss jumped nearly a foot at Yang's sudden yell, and found herself floundering backward once she caught sight of the crimson rage in Yang's eyes. With the spell broken, Weiss took in the room with a clear head. Ruby seemed more confused than anything, a deep blush on her face as she looked at her sister. Blake, on the other hand, looked both terrified and horrified. She glanced quickly at Ruby, then at Yang, and then strangely at Weiss. When their eyes met, Weiss's heart skipped a beat. That look in her eyes, that the same look she had last month, like she'd been found out, like she was scared. Weiss's barely registered the gust of wind that blew past her, only catching the slightest glimpse of black as the bathroom door slammed shut. They all stared at the door for a second before Yang let out a growl. "Oh no you don't! Not this time, Belladonna! You get your ass out right here! Right now. Sorry. You get your ass out here right now!" Ruby rushed in front of her, rose petals floating around her. "Yang, wait!" Yang paused for a second, frowning down at her sister before glaring back at the door. "Out of my way, Ruby." "Yang, just wait for... Did you ask?" Ruby blinked at the question. "What? Did you?" "Ask her to kiss you." Yang's red eyes stared into Ruby's, her face unsettlingly calm. Ruby blushed, stammering, "Well, not exactly." Yang nodded. "Yep, I'm gonna break her." She pushed past Ruby, only to be blocked again. "Yang, just what, Ruby?" Yang suddenly yelled. "Just what, Ruby?" Yang's sudden yell made both Ruby and Weiss jump. The blonde stared down at Ruby, face flushed in anger. I get out of the shower, and the first thing I see is my partner macking on my little sister. I mean, what the hell got into her to think that was in any way okay? Give me one reason I shouldn't bust down that door and beat her into... I think Blake's sick. Yang paused mid-word, her arms still up from flailing in her rant. "Excuse me?" Seeing that Yang stopped, Ruby brushed her head. "See, after the movies, I saw Blake was acting kind of funny, so I watched her for a while before she threw her books down, and I saw that she was all red and sweaty and really tense, so I went over to her and I felt her forehead and she was really, really warm, so I asked her if she was okay, and then she started acting kind of weird and rubbing on me, and then her cat ears popped out, so I scratched them and she started purring, which was really, really cute, but then she looked at me and her eyes got all slantly, and then she kissed me and it felt really nice, and then I kissed back, and then she came out, and I'm going to be quiet now." Well, this one is really hard to pronounce because it's all one word. One word. And then kissed back, then came out, and be quiet now. In a single word. She trailed off, her eyes on the ground, her cheeks red. Weiss and Yang just stared at her for a moment before Yang tilted her head to the side in confusion, red eyes dimming back to lavender. What?" Weiss shook her head at the two before elaborating. "Ruby noticed that Blake was acting odd and went to check on her. Blake kind of froze when Ruby touched her and then started acting like..." She paused, unsure what to say. "Like?" Yang asked. Weiss shifted uncomfortably. "Well, for lack of a better word, she was acting like a cat." Yang's eyes widened before narrowing dangerously. "You want to rephrase that, princess?" Weiss let out a frustrated sigh, anticipating that kind of reaction to her words. "Believe me, if I would, I could, but that's truly how she was acting. When Ruby checked on her for a fever, Blake started rubbing against her like a cat begging for attention, and when Ruby scratched her ears..." "Huh?" Yang turned back to Ruby, who shrugged. "It was all I could think of. She started purring." "Wait, what?" Yang snapped back at to Weiss. Purring, as in actually purring. Weiss nodded. Just like a cat would, yes. Exact same sound. And well, you saw. Yang looked between the two before staring at the bathroom door. So, there's actually something wrong with Blake? She didn't just suddenly get the hots for Ruby. Weiss and Weiss and Ruby blushed at her bluntness. As far as we can tell. Oh, Weiss said. Uh, sorry. Oh, Yang said, the last remaining bits of her anger fading away. Then she looked concerned. So, what's wrong with her? We don't know. We didn't get that far. I don't think she knows what she was doing. We don't know. We didn't get that far. I don't think she knows what she was doing. Weiss and Yang turned to the leader, still staring at the ground. What do you mean, Rubes? Yang asked. Well, when you broke us, Ruby startled awkwardly, sorry. When you broke us up, she looked kinda confused, like she didn't know where she was. Weiss frowned. Like she was in a trance or something? Ruby nodded. Yeah, her eyes went back to normal, and then she looked scared. Well, I was kinda pissed. Yang rubbed her neck with a sheepish smile on her face. To their surprise, Ruby shook her head, frowning. No, it was before she saw you. I think I think she was scared of me. She looked up to meet their stunned face. Of what she'd done with me. They fell silent as that sunk in. Then Weiss had a thought, pulling out her scroll. What are you doing, princess? Yang asked. Ignoring the nickname, Weiss started typing. I'm pulling up a medical database my family owns. You have a medical database? Ruby asked. Weiss paused, then continued typing. Long story. I'm thinking that maybe if I type in Blake's symptoms, at least the one we know about, it could give us an idea of what's going on with her. Oh. Yang and Ruby droned, then rushed to Weiss' side to watch her progress. Weiss blushed at feeling the sisters lean against her before she finished typing. Fever, sweating, animalistic tendencies, need for affection, loss of memory. That should do it. Search. They watched a little. They watched as a little progress bar at the top of the screen filled up, followed by a red text taking up the screen. 0 result found. What? Weiss practically screamed. This is the most advanced, up-to-date medical server in the kingdom. It has every illness known to man, from natural to drug-induced. How can there be nothing? Just as Weiss was about to call up the company and complain to whatever idiot was in charge, Yang spoke. Hey, you said your family owned this database, right? Weiss raised an eyebrow, confused by her question. Yes? Why? Would they have anything on Fauna's specific illnesses? Weiss opened her mouth to berate her. Of course they would, but stopped when she realized her family owned the database. Weiss's head dipped down at the realization. A cold feeling grew inside her, one she had begun feeling increasingly often in the last month. Shame. No, she said softly. They wouldn't. Without another word, she copied the symptoms she had typed into the database and opened the self-used internet browser on a scroll. She passed them into the search bar and hit enter. At the top of the page, a link to a medical site said, Faunus S-Truth Cycle. Weiss clicked on it, and after reading a few paragraphs, all three were blushing. Well, that explains it, Yang said after a moment. Ruby tilted her head to the side. So, Blake wants to have her babies? Ruby! Weiss screeched, aghast, as Yang howled with laughter. Ruby blushed deeper, looking back at the ground. Well, that's what it sounds like. Weiss cleared her throat, her cheeks still tainted. Yes, well, she trailed off, staring toward the bathroom door. Yang, having finally calmed down, followed her gaze. Yeah, that about sums it up. So, what now? Weiss shrugged awkwardly. Talk to her, I suppose? Yang rolled her eyes. Well, yeah, no duh. I mean, what do we say to her? Well, make sure our suspicions are correct, of course, Weiss said, attempting to be mature. Then we'll, try and help her? Yang gave Weiss a weird look. Uh, help her as in. It took a moment. It took quite a moment before she understood Yang's implication. What? No! 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 Not. That's not what I mean. I didn't mean to imply. I wasn't suggesting. Despite the situation, Yang struggled not to burst up as Weiss blushed and stuttered through a denial of any suggestive activities. She was just about to lose it when Ruby spoke. Hey guys, they both turned to her. Hasn't she been in there for a while? Yang blinked. Actually, yeah. Blake had been locked in the bathroom for quite some time. Well, Princess does have a point. We should at least talk to her. Yang walked up to the door and knocked softly. Hey Blake? When she didn't get an answer, she continued. Hey, I'm sorry for freaking out on you. I'm calmer now. Can you come out? When no answer came, she looked back at the other. Ruby and Weiss stared back, concerned. Yang knocked again, harder. Blake? You okay in there? Yang put her ears to the door. She could hear the shower running, but that was it. Strangely, the door felt cool to the touch. Blake? Still no response. Getting worried, Yang tried the handle, still locked. She stared at the door before sighing. Guess I'm paying for a new door, she mumbled under her breath. Then she raised her voice. Blake, I'm coming in. With all her strength, she threw her shoulder into the door, easily breaking the frame. Finally inside, she said, Blake, are you. Yang's voice caught in her throat as she looked toward the shower. Blake was curled in on herself in the corner of the shower, fully clothed. The water beat down on her flushed skin relentlessly, soaking her sleeping robe. Her arms were thrown over her head, her whole body tense. She was shivering. Blake! Yang yelled as she ran across the room, nearly sleeping on the wet tiles. She reached for the shower knobs, flinching as the ice-cold water hit her. Once the water stopped, she knelt beside Blake, putting her hands on her shoulder. She's freezing! Blake? Blake looked up through her arms, and Weiss was stunned at the wet, slitted eyes staring back at her, the amber orbs widening when she saw the blonde. Yang? Her voice was so quiet. Yang frowned at her stutter. The furnace was shivering so bad Yang could hear her teeth chattering. She snapped her head toward the doorway where Weiss and Ruby stared in shock. Ruby! Yang barked, snapping the snipers back to attention. Get some towels! Ruby took one more look at Blake before nodding. Right, she yelled before dashing over the closet. Yang turned back to Blake, who was staring at her through the gap in her arm. When Yang tried to touch her arm, she flinched away. No, Yang, you can't. I'm not. Blake, you're freezing. You gotta get out here. Yang tried to pull the girl up, but Blake wouldn't budge. I can't. You don't understand. I think I do. Blake's head snapped up, terror in her eyes. Yang felt her heart twist at the sight. And I ain't gonna let you turn yourself into a popsicle if I can help it. Before Blake could respond, Yang yelled behind her, Ruby, where are those? Right here. Ruby materialized in front of her, holding a stack of white towels. Yang grabbed one on the top and was about to use it before she noticed the problem. Okay, Blake, I'm really sorry, and please don't hate me for this. What? Blake stuttered out before Yang gripped her arms. With one motion, Yang pulled back Blake's arms apart, leaving Blake exposed. Moving quickly, Yang then grabbed the front of Blake's robes and pulled. A wet rip echoed through the room. Blake blinked, suddenly finding herself clad only in her wet bra and panties, sitting in the shredded remains of a robe. From the doorway, Weiss let out a squawk of indignation. Yang, you do not just do that! Before Blake could fully react, she felt softness envelop her as Yang wrapped the towel around her torso, doing the same with her leg. Blake looked down in confusion at the towel before staring back up at Yang. Better? Yang asked with a nervous smile on her lips. Blake tried to say something, but her voice caught in her throat. Yes, this felt so much better than the ice shower she'd subject herself to, but without the cold water beating down on her, she could feel the warmth coming back, not helped by the fact that Yang was so close. Yang, she tried, but Yang pressed her index finger to her lips. Shh! She shushed with a stern expression. Let's get out of here before we talk. Blake jumped as Yang suddenly put her arms under her and lifted. Blake shuddered as she was suddenly wrapped in Yang's very warm embrace, the blonde carrying her across and out of the room, past a very concerned-looking Weiss and Ruby. Inside her, the fire roared. And that's another chapter down. Yay! Water, please water. I need it badly this time. Oh, this is some work. God dang. I did not suspect this. I think I'm going to do one last chapter, and then after that, I'll do a pause and I'll see if I want to continue. Yep. Chapter 4, Acceptance. Okay, Blake, start talking. Blake's eyes flitted to Yang before staring back at her hands. Yang had placed her on her bed, still wrapped in towels, before taking a seat in the desk chair, sitting backward with her arms folded on the backrest. Yang sat on the edge of her bed while Ruby settled for sitting cross-legged on the floor near Blake's bed. All three stared at her, waiting for an answer. Blake pulled the towel around her tighter. She shook. She took a shaky breath. Just get it over with. I'm in heat, she whispered out, unable to look at any of them. The room was silent, Blake waiting for the pin to drop. Any second now it would happen. The anger, the disgust, the utter revulsion at the realization of exactly what she was, what that entailed. Blake closed her slitted eyes, tears welling up as she waited for the rejection. Well, we kinda figured that. Blake's eyes flew open at Yang's dismissive tone. She saw the blonde giving her a troubled look, frowning slightly. What? She asked hesitantly. Yang jerked her chin toward Weiss. You are just worried, so Princess looked up how you were acting on the web. Wasn't that hard? Weiss scoffed, rolling her eyes. At least I thought of something, she mumbled before looking at Blake. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. Blake flinched at the question. Despite Weiss's soft tone, or at least soft for her, she looked into Weiss's eyes and, to her awe, saw only worry. She turned to Yang, then Ruby, only to see more of the same. You're not mad? The reaction she got was nothing like she expected. If anything, it looked like they were the shocked one now. Mad? Yang said incredulously. Why would we be mad? Blake, what's going on? What reason would we have to be mad at you for this? It's not like you can help it. Wise crossed her arms, frowning. Blake only stared in disbelief, not knowing how to respond. Ruby, who had been quiet until now, asked, Blake, are you scared of us? All of them turned toward Ruby, who was beating her lip nervously. What? What do you mean, Rube? She ain't scared of us. Right, Blake? Yang turned toward Blake with a smile on her face, only to falter when Blake dipped her head down, pulling at her towel. Right? Blake was silent, not looking at anyone. Wise gave a huff before turning to her scroll, thinking maybe the web page could give her further insight, when Blake's broken voice reached her ear. Yes, she whispered, her cat ears pinning back against her head. Yes, I'm scared. Ruby scooted a little closer, confused. Why? She asked softly. Blake kept her head down as she went on. I'm not human. Weiss and Yang eyes widened at her tone, while Ruby just tilted her head. I act like I am. I hid my ears. I slow myself down. I try to keep myself as normal as possible, so no one will notice that there's anything different between a human and a faunus, but she cleared her voice as her throat grew thicker, a tear sliding down her cheek. But there is. Blake, Ruby whispered, eyes wide. Blake didn't hear her as she continued, her voice cracking. The way I act and the way I want to act, the little whims, just random things I feel every now and then that I just force myself to ignore so that everyone will think I'm normal, and then this, she hissed out, looking down at herself in contempt. At her reddened skin and slight sweating, the fire was in full force, burning at her insides. The only thing keeping her from acting on the feelings was the destruction of her teammate, though she knew that would only last so long. Blake's anger burnt itself out quickly, leaving only sadness in its wake. Tears flowed down her face. You all know I'm a funner, and I know you're telling the truth when you say you don't care, but I just keep waiting for the moment you realize how different I am and, Ruby asked, and start to hate me. Silence filled the room once again as she gave up. She cried silently, tears flowing freely as she took shaky breath. Nope. Blake looked up and nearly flinched when she found Ruby right in front of her. What? Nope, Ruby repeated before throwing her arms around the furnace. Blake froze as Ruby clung tightly to her, pulling her close so that the leader's chin rested on her shoulder. Ruby? We could never hate you. Blake's eyes widened. You're a friend, Blake. We don't care that you're a furnace, whether you're normal or not. You're a member of our team, and we trust you. And we trust you with our lives. We love you. Fresh tears sprung from Blake's eyes. Ruby, strong, warm arms suddenly wrapped around the both of them. Couldn't have it. Sorry. Couldn't have said it better myself, little sis. Sorry, Blake. You couldn't make us hate you if you tried. Yang smiled brightly as she gave Blake a squeeze. Blake stared back, tears flowing. Yang! A weight settled onto the bed next to her, making Blake turn to the side. Weiss was sitting next to her, head pointed down. You told me you were once a member of the White Fang, the organization that's been making my family lives, and by extension my life, a living hell. She turned to Blake, her eyes soft. If that couldn't make me hate you, what makes you think this could? Blake was dumbfounded. Weiss, the heiress put a small awkwardly. The heiress put a hand awkwardly on her shoulder. Ruby's right. You're my friend, she smiled. Nothing can change that. Ah, no, you don't. Get in there. Yang suddenly grabbed Wyatt's wrist and pulled, forcing the heiress' arm to go over Blake's shoulder with an "ip" before Wyatt glared at the blonde, who just grinned back, making Wyatt roll her eyes and put her other arm around Ruby, completing the group hug. Blake looked around at the three girls around her, all smiling, all giving her comfort. They don't hate me, she thought, her lips slowly shifting into a smile. They accept me. They love me. Slowly, Blake wrapped her arms around Ruby's waist, the only one she could reach around, making Ruby squeezed her harder as Blake buried her face into the leader's shoulder. Blake sank into the embrace, feeling the safety and acceptance of her team around her. She hummed in contentment as their body pressed around against her, their warm, soft bodies. Her eyes snapped open. Oops. Guys, she said hesitantly. The tree pulls back, looking at her questioningly. Ah! I really appreciate this, but you're making me kind of warm. It took a full 5 seconds for the words to fully register before all of them flew back, blushing. Oh crap, I forgot about that. I didn't intend to. I didn't mean. Sorry, Blake. If the circumstances had been different, Blake would have burst out laughing at how flustered her team was, all blushing and trying to look anywhere but at Blake. Unfortunately, the roaring, burning, rather frustrated fire inside her kept her silent. Everyone shifted awkwardly until Yang broke the silence. So, what do we do about this? Blake shook her head. I don't know. I usually have some medicine that helps me through this, but I'm all out. Oh, well, maybe someone else on campus has some you can borrow, Ruby suggested. I thought of that. That's actually what I was going to check earlier, but the lockdown, Yang realized, rubbing her neck. Well, crap. Any other ideas? Blake shrugged. Why started sporting a blush. Forgive my bluntness, but couldn't you just take care of the problem yourself? Blake blushed at her meaning, as did Yang and Ruby. No, I can't. A furnace it affects both the body and the mind. For that route to work, I would need a partner. Awkward silence reigned as the implication of her statement sank in. Yang's blush deepening a bit at her wording. Blake racked her brain for an alternative, or at least as much as she could with her heat frazzled mind. Is that an option? All eyes turned toward Ruby, whose face was as red as her cloak. Ruby? Blake asked. Ruby shifted in place, swallowing slightly. If you need a partner. Blake looked down at her in confusion before her mouth popped open. Did she just suggest? What? No! Yang suddenly shouted, putting herself between Blake and Ruby. No, 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 no. Hell no. Don't even think about it. What? Blake said it would work, Ruby said, pouting slightly. I don't freaking care. You are not shagging Blake, especially when I'm stuck in a room with you. Wise finally seemed to have caught on to the conversation. Wait, do you mean... No, I mean, I don't... She trailed off as her face turned redder and redder. Blake stared at Ruby with wide eyes, a sharp denial on her lip despite the fire inside her roaring in approval. She appreciated the sentiment, but there was no way she could let Ruby... Well, do you have a better idea? Ruby's angry yell made Yang stop shouting and take a few steps back in surprise. Weiss and Blake stared at her in shock. They'd never seen Ruby mad before. The room silent, Ruby took a deep breath, then turned to Blake. Blake, you said you needed a partner? Blake, still in shock, nodded slightly. Yes? And you're sure it would help with your heat? Blake stammered a response. Well, yeah, but Ruby. Before Ruby gave her an awkward smile before turning back to Blake. Do you have any other ideas? She asked honestly. Yang looked down at her sister, looking lost. No, but Ruby turned her head toward Weiss, the same question in her eyes. All Weiss could do was shake her head. She glanced back at Blake before staring up at Yang. Yang held her stare before letting out a sigh. Ruby, don't you remember the talk we had? You know, the big one? Ruby nodded. Yes, I do. You said I should save my first time for someone I love and trust. Yeah, and I love Blake, Ruby said simply, as if it was the simplest thing in the world, making Blake blush. I trust her, too. Yang's eyebrow twitched, looking irritated. That is not what I meant, and you know it. Ruby shrugged. So, I'd rather it be with Blake than someone I don't know as well. And it's to help her, too. Yang struggled for something to say. Ruby, she huffed. You. Blake finally found a voice. Ruby, I appreciate the sentiment, but I can't let you do this. Especially if it's your first time. You need to save that for someone special. You're special, Ruby replied bluntly, tilting her head in confusion. Are we really talking about this? Was interjected, still red-faced. I feel like things are getting a bit out of hand. Ruby let out a sigh. Look, Blake, you said this would pass in the morning? Blake nodded before Ruby looked toward the clock on the desk. Well, morning is 9 hours away, so our choices are either Blake stays like this all that time, or... She trailed off, her face turning red. Blake searched for something, anything she could say to dissuade Ruby, but her frazzled mind couldn't think of nothing. Blake Yang looked back and forth between her sister and her partner. You... She turned to Weiss, who could only offer a helpless shrug, just as lost as her. Yang let out a growl of frustration. Oh, okay. Let's just step back and look at the facts. She stared, pacing. Oh, that's a mistake. She started pacing, her hands moving as she spoke. Blake is in heat. She's all out of medicine. We are locked in our room. No way to leave. Only way we can think to help is... She looked at Ruby. Weiss, give me that scroll. Weiss practically ripped the scroll from Weiss's hand, surprising the heiress, who fell back on her bed. Yang kept pacing about the room, skimming through the web page from where they'd stopped before. There's gotta be something in here. Increase in body temperature, increased desire for affection, phantom pain. Wait, what was that last part? Yang reread the portion of article, but as she read further, her pacing slowed to a stop. When a female faunus is at the height of her heat, her body temperature can reach her body temperature can reach a height of 102 to 104 degrees. It is at this point that the body will be at its most receptive. During intercourse, the faunus brain will release a specific type of endorphin that helps regulate body heat. If these endorphins are not released, the faunus runs the risk of overheating and, in some cases, phantom pains that will persist until their heat has passed. Yang looked up from the scroll. Her worried eyes landed on Blake, who stared back with slitted eyes. Her face had grown redder, a visible tremble in her shoulders. Her ears were pinned against her head. Her breath was choppy. She won't make it till morning. It'd be hell. Weiss took a deep breath, letting it out slowly through her nose. Oh, this is gonna be a weird night. Ruby and Weiss looked at her with Blake's eyes widening further. Is she... Okay, I'm on board with this. What? Why screeched, jumping out of for her bed. All her eyes turned to the heiress, who looked back in utter shock, mouth gaping. Yang, are you serious? You and Ruby? I don't even know where. She was cut off when Yang placed the scroll back in her hands. Read, she said simply, tapping on the words she'd read. On the words she'd read. Weiss looked at the scroll, eyes straining quickly over the words before coming to a stop. Weiss looked up at Yang, looking uncomfortable, before turning away and sitting back down. Yang gave a nod before turning to Ruby. Okay, Rube, I don't want to ask, but I kinda have to ask. Do you even know how to. Thirst, I can't believe I'm saying this. Do you know how to have sex with another girl? She asked with a blush. Ruby blushed back, speaking quietly. Yeah, kinda. Yang let out a breath. Okay, well, that simplifies. She cut herself off, a thought hitting her. Wait, how do you know? Ruby's eyes widened before she looked away, mumbling. Excuse me? Ruby spoke just slightly louder, enough that Yang could make it out. Under bed, underneath old jacket, magazines. Yang blinked, then facepalmed. I thought one of those went missing. She took another breath. Well then, Blake, what do you think? Blake, having watched and heard everything from her bed, just stared, her gaze flickering between Yang and Ruby. They really. No, I can't. It's not. She flinched as a sudden burst of heat ripped through her. She was nearly at her breaking point. She looked to Ruby, then to Yang. Both looked back, small smiles, nervous but genuine on her lips. You sure? She asked, the words slipping out before she could think to stop them. The sisters glanced at each other before nodding. Yeah, we're sure. Her lips quirked upward. Who knows? Could be fun. Yang looked back at Weiss. What about you, Snowflake? Blake turned her gaze to Weiss, who was looking at the wall, chewing a thumbnail. Her eyes flicked toward Blake, lingering for a second before looking away, face flushed. Can I just think about this for a bit? She said she said quickly before staring into Yang's eyes. Please? She asked softly. After a moment, Yang nodded. It's your choice. Not like you got drafted or something. Weiss nodded back, grabbing her scroll as she made her way toward the bathroom. Sort of feels like it, though, she mumbled under her breath as she closed the door. The tree stared after her before turning back. So, Ruby started awkwardly. How do we do this? Yang shrugged. Do what feels natural, I guess. So, Blake, which one of us ladies get the first honor? She smirked slightly, her usual mirth coming back. Blake blushed as her heat soared to new heights, heart thumping in her chest. This is really happening, she thought. She did note that Ruby seemed a lot more nervous than Yang. She smiled, Yang's humor seeping into her. Well, seeing as Ruby got to kiss me already, she said, giving Yang a look. Yang took the hit, leaning in as Blake let the throat slip from her shoulder. The last thing she felt before reason left her was Yang's soft lips against hers, the fire slowly calming down. I expect to be better at narrating at some point, but right now, oh god, I'm stuttering all like crazy. That was my back. I needed this. Bit of water, and we'll continue. I think I'm going to do one more, maybe two, and then we'll call it a day. Wow, Blake stared up at Yang's bunk as the memory flooded back. A smile grew across her face. That that really happened. She turned her head to look at Yang and Weiss, still slumbering in the morning lights. She gazed down at Ruby, who shifted a little, nuzzling Blake's chest, making her blush. I wish I could remember. One problem with dealing with her heat as she did was that her memories got hazier as the night went on. Everything past that first kiss with Yang was a blur. A hot, happy, blush inducing blur. A flash of white appeared in her memory. She looked down at Weiss, who snored softly, her unkempt hair hiding half of her face. Like Ruby, she moved a bit, finding a comfortable place atop her blonde pillow. I wonder how that happened, she thought. Her last clear memories of Weiss being her hiding in the bathroom. Still, the sight made her smile. Seeing those two, usually at each other's throat, embracing each other in such a way left a warm feeling in her chest. Hmm. Blake looked toward. Blake looked down at Ruby's little noise. Instead of waking up like she'd thought, Ruby just raised her head slightly, giving Blake a view of her sleeping face. Her lips curled in a smile. A random thought entered her mind, and for once, Blake acted on it. Hesitantly, Blake gently placed her hand on Ruby's head, running her fingers through the girl's short hair. Seeing her smile widen at the touch, Blake kept it up, gently massaging Ruby's scalp, as as soft smile on her lips. There's a missing word here. Enjoying yourself, Blake? Blake froze. She slowly swiveled her head toward the voice. Yang just grinned smugly at her, eyebrows raised above her open eyes. Blake blushed at being caught. Yang's grin faded to a reassuring smile. Relax, kitty cat, she whispered so as to not wake their still sleeping teammates. I'm just messing with ya. You feeling better now? Blake relaxed, now assured that Yang wouldn't put her through a wall for touching her little sister. Yeah, I feel much better. Now. I forgot the now. That was an understatement. Blake felt incredible. Most morning after a hit, she'd wake up with a stiff body and a pounding head, like a bad hangover. Now, though, she felt amazing, warm and content in the morning light. Yang nodded. Good, she said softly. That's good. Good. That's good. More appropriate. Her gaze dropped a little, her smile growing slightly melancholic as she looked at Ruby, still snoring away. Blake followed her gaze, noticing that she still had her hand on her leader's head. She removed it before turning her attention back to the blonde. Yang, is something wrong? Yang blinked rapidly, breaking from her trance. I'm going to redo that. Yang blinked rapidly, breaking from her trance as she looked back to Blake. Huh? Oh, it's nothing, just. Her eyes fell back to Ruby, smiling again. I knew Ruby was going to grow up someday. She let out a brief chuckle. I didn't think I'd get a front row seat when it happened. I just didn't think I'd get a front row seat when it happened. Blake's eyes widened, regret worming into her chest. Yang, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't even try it, kitty cat. Yang interrupted, a serious look in her eyes. You didn't do anything. It was her choice. Then a grin formed of her lips. And weirdly enough, I'm kind of proud of her. How screwed up does that sound? Blake tried to smile back, but now doubt was working its way into her mind. She glanced to both Ruby and Weiss. Roaring thought formed in her head. She turned to Yang. I didn't hurt any of you last night, did I? Yang gave her a shocked, then a then a very confused look. What, you don't remember? To her surprise, Blake shook her head. When a furnace gives into their heat, we pretty much go off on pure instinct. I remember everything up to, well, our first kiss. And then it's all a blur. Yang frowned. Well, that sucks. You don't remember anything? Blake thought hard. Brief glimpses of lips and touches flashed by, but nothing lasting. However, she did feel one thing. Happy, she said with a smile. The whole night, I remember being really happy. Yang nodded. That's an understatement. She muttered, causing Blake to blush deeper. Obviously, her memory was just fine. No, you didn't hurt any of us. If anything, you were kind of timid. Blake brown furthered in confusion. What do you mean? Yang thought for a moment. Well, it was kinda like you were just following our lead. Blake's ears folded back a bit. How so? Like with me, you were kinda aggressive. You didn't hold back, and neither did I. Her cheeks tinted slightly at the mental image. But with Ruby, you were hesitant. You wanted for her to do something first, then you did the same. Did that make any sense? Blake thought for a moment, then she pulled her lips away from Ruby's, her ears folded back, a frown forming as she felt the uneasiness rolling off of Ruby. Ruby looked up at her from the bed, her throat moving as she swallowed nervously. Blake tilted her head, then smiled. She grasped Ruby by the shoulder and fell on her side. With a small huff, she pulled Ruby on top of her. Ruby blinked, suddenly finding their position slipped. She looked down at Blake questioningly. Blake just leaned up and rubbed her cheek against Ruby's. She laid back down, placing her arms on her side. Ruby's eyes flickered to the side. What do I do? Ying's voice came off from the side. Whatever you think would make her feel good, sis. Ruby hesitated before bringing her lips back to Blake's neck. Blake let out a small coo at the feeling. Ruby pulled back quickly, concerned. Was that okay? Blake just smiled, nodding. She showed her neck in invitation. Ruby smiled back nervously before kissing Blake's neck again. Blake smiled at the memory. Yeah, I think it does. She turned her attention to the head of White laying on Yang's chest. So how did that happen? Yang followed her gaze, a soft smile forming. Well, I am going to sue whoever made these earplugs. Wei stared down at her scroll, having read yet another article on furnace mating habits, just like all the others. This one was just a rewarded version of the exact same information. She started typing again, searching for more information. Oh, Blake! Wei's never-ending blush deepened yet again. Yes, definitely suing. Every single infernal lien they have. For what felt like hours, Wise had tried to tune out the muffled cries and moans coming from behind the wall. And Fazison tried. Even with the simple earplugs she'd found in the medicine cabinet, she could hear every sound, every time the moan of Blake's names altered from Yang to Ruby, and it was starting to get to her. I wonder what it's like, she thought, not for the first time. Yet again, she felt the impulse to open the door, to give in to curiosity, and yet again, she forced herself to stay sitting, her father's voice echoing in her head. Shaking the thought from her head, she turned to her scroll. Maybe if I reward the question. Click. Weiss was jolted from her thought as the bathroom door creaked open. Turning in surprise, she looked up at the intruder. Yang stumbled through the bathroom, a dopey smile on her face. Her hair was disheveled, as was the tank top she'd haphazardly thrown on. Blake's towel was wrapped around her waist. Weiss blushed at the look on her face before turning away. Yang, what are you doing in here? Yang blinked at her voice, looking down. Ah, gee, sorry, Wise. Kinda forgot you were in here. With a frown, Ruby pulled out the useless earplugs. What do you mean you forgot? She hissed indignantly. Yang rubbed the back of a. Ah. Yang rubbed her neck sheepishly. Well, I was kinda preoccupied. Wise narrowed her eyes. I'm well aware of that, she muttered. Her, she looked at Yang from the corner of her eyes. So, um, are you three finished? She, she started nervously. The question surprised Yang. Uh, she poked her head out of the bathroom, her eyes falling on Blake's bed. Blake and Ruby were curled up together, the blankets just barely hiding their modesty. Ruby was humming softly as she scratched lazily at Blake's ear, who just lapped up the attention. Feeling her gaze, Blake slid one eye open, a hungry look in her slitted eyes as she smiled. Yang grinned back before turning to Wise, closing the door. Nah, we're just taking a breather. I thought I'd just take a quick rinse off. She made her way to the shower. That okay? Wise stuttered before turning away as Yang discarded her tank top. Sure. She kept her eyes to the side as she heard the towel hit the floor and the water turn on. Wise was fully intent on just keeping her head down the whole time until Yang started talking. So, what have you been doing here in here? What have you been doing in here? Yang's Wise chanced to look up and was thankful that Yang had closed the shower curtain, leaving only a fuzzy outline of her body. Just waiting for you to get all done, she muttered. The outline tilted its head. Oh, so that's a no on joining in? Wise shoved down the indignant splutter, settling instead for feigned indifference. You all seem to be doing fine on your own. Even blurred, Wise could just feel Yang's roller eyes. Ugh, fine, I'll shut up. A minute or so passed, the only sound that of falling water. Wise tried to focus on her scroll, but without meaning to, her eyes kept straying toward the shower. So, Wise closed her mouth with an audible click. The word had fallen out without a thought, and Wise didn't even know what question she'd been about to ask. She just hoped that Yang hadn't heard her. Yeah? Drat. Wise struggled for a thought, many questions popping in her head as she tried to find one that wasn't inappropriate, given the circumstances. Though, given the circumstances, is everything going okay? Yang chuckled behind the curtains. I think so, and from the way Blake looked just a bit ago, I think she'd agree with me. Wise blushed. Well, I knew that. Stupid earplugs. And Ruby, she's doing okay? Yang's form froze for a second before giving an odd laugh. Yeah, she's fine. Quick learner too. A little too quick, she muttered the last part before trailing off. A sudden thought struck Wise, suddenly feeling as if all of her blood had rushed to her face. Pushing it away, she instead asked, Isn't this a little awkward? You know, doing it with my partner while my sister watches? Yang supplied as she shut off the shower. Yes, Wise, it's awkward as all hell. Wise fell silent, guessing Yang was a bit more volatile at the moment than she thought. Sorry, she mumbled. After a moment, she heard Yang sigh. It's not your fault. I'm just coming to grips that my little sister ain't so little anymore. Wise swallowed down her nerves as Yang reached out of the curtain and searching for a towel. But she's alright, right? Like she's enjoying herself? Yang stopped at her tone. She poked her head out of the curtain and looked at Wise. Wise was still sitting against the wall, staring off to the side. Her face was bit red, but her expression, rather than embarrassment like she'd figured, Wise seemed more nervous and curious than anything else. What do you ask? Weiss shifted her weight a little, looking uncomfortable. Well, she said this is the first time, and I was just making sure it was going well. Yang frowned. This was new. Weiss always spoke very clearly whenever she had something to say. The only time she didn't was when she was flustered or really angry, and in those instances she was always loud. But this, Yang had never heard her stumble over words like this, especially with how quiet she was, almost mumbling. Making a quick decision, Yang wrapped herself in a towel and stepped out. Weiss didn't notice she was moving until Yang sat down on the floor right next to her. Yang, what? Spill. Weiss flinched at the commanding tone. What? Something's knocking around in that high class head of yours, Yang said with a raised eyebrow. So if you want to talk about to, so if you want to talk to somebody, now's the chance. So spill. Weiss stared at her before turning away, indignant. I have no idea what you're. She trailed off when she saw Yang's unimpressed look out of the corner of her eyes. After a moment, her resolve crumbled. It's stupid, she sighed. Yang let out a soft chuckle. I'll be the judge of that. So. Weiss was quiet, staring down at her hands as she twiddled with her fingers. Is this normal for you? Yang couldn't help but scoff. A three-way involving my sister? Yeah, Weiss, totally normal. To her surprise, Weiss just shook her head, her face scrunching up in concentration. No, I mean, she glanced at Yang before averting her gaze. Being with a girl, Yang blinked. Oh, for me? Yeah, pretty much. Weiss was just taken aback by her bluntness. Really? Yang shrugged at her. Well, yeah, boys never really had an interest for me, you know. I mean, they're fun to hang out with every now and then, but attractiveness? Oh, was Weiss's only answer, staring back at her hands in thought. Yang watched her for a minute, watching the nervous energy roll off of her. So, what about you? Weiss swallowed. It's complicated. Yang rolled her eyes. Yeah, see, everyone always says that until they actually say things out loud. Talk to me, Snowflake. You into cheeks or just. Weiss cut her off with an indignant squid before deflating. Look, I just can't be. Yang was confused. Can't? Can't be what? Weiss huffed, looking away. I can't be gay, she whispered. Yang's frown deepened. Okay, I never heard that one before. Yes, no, I don't know, but never heard someone say they can't be gay. Something wrong with liking girls? Weiss shook her head, frowning. No, at least I don't think so. Yang hummed, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. But someone else does, she stated. Weiss started cursing a slip of tongue. After a moment, stared instead of started. It's a mistake. Weiss stared, cursing a slip of tongue. After a moment, she closed her eyes, letting out a deep breath through her nose. Well, I've gone this far. It's my father. Yang stayed quiet, sensing a touchy subject. Instead, she just dipped her head toward Weiss, motioning for her to continue. Weiss hesitated before continuing. He's very conservative. To him, there's a status quo, and that's it. Humans before fairness, men with women. Anything that strays just a little outside the lines. Yang watched as she was Yang watched her as she felt silent. Then she looked around, not seeing anything. She placed her hand above her head, squinting as she moved her head side to side. Wise looked at her like she was crazy. What are you doing? Looking for your dad, Yang said matter of factly. Weird. I don't see him. Wise called at her, looking away. I actually thought you were taking this seriously. She was cut off when Yang lightly for Yang, popped her on the head. She whipped around to see Yang frowning. I am being serious. He ain't here. And, in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, he's on another freaking continent right now, right? Wise nodded, completely lost. Yang smiled at her. Well then, he ain't here to tell you what to do. Complication uncomplicated. Wise blinked, her face softening a bit. A look of hope crossed her features before being smothered by a scowl. Maybe in your word, she muttered. Yang grimaced. Okay, strike one, she thought hard, looking for another way to make Wise open up. Well, how about this? Hypothetically. Hypothetically. Ooh, big words, Wise said mockingly. Yang glared. Shut it, she continued. Hypothetically. Let's pretend that your dad wasn't in the picture. Yang, pretending. She blocked. Wise rolled her eyes, relenting. Yang went on. If your dad wasn't a factor in this, whatsoever, which do you think you're attracted toward? Guys or girls? Wise turned away, fully intent to ignore the question. As the silence stretched on, however, she glanced back at Yang. Rather than being frustrated like she had assumed, Yang was simply looking at her, patiently waiting for an answer. Patiently waiting for an answer. Wise tried to ignore her, but as the second ticked by, the question kept repeating itself in her head. Finally, she gave up. Closing her eyes, she dipped her head down. I never really thought about it. I never let myself think about it, she clarified. Not until tonight. Yang hummed at her words. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Yang hummed at her words, hard at thought. What about tonight? Wise gave her an are you stupid look. You three. You are having a normal night and then Blake goes into it and you and Ruby just. You made it seem so simple. Yang snorted, much to Wise's surprise. Yeah, I wouldn't call it simple. Mind explaining? You just. Wise struggled to put her thoughts into words. You and Ruby argued, but the fact that Blake was a girl, you didn't even mention it. You made it seem like it's like such a non-issue. Yang could only shrug. Well, it kinda is, at least to me. Ruby too, apparently. Wise shook her head, bemused. Well, it's not to me. I mean, I don't even know if I'm attracted to girls or boys, I just don't know. She nearly screamed in frustration. Yang frowned at Weiss's outburst. Sorry again. Gosh, twice in a row. I'm gonna drink a bit. Yang frowned at Weiss's outburst. Geez, this is really messing with her. How the heck do I... Ding! Yang blinked. Huh, that could work. Or make things or make things 10 times worse. Worth a shot. Hey, Wise? The heiress looked up, finding Yang smiling down at her. I can think of an easy way to know if you like girls, at least. Wise gave her a wary look. What? Well, Yang droned, leaning against Wise a bit. You could kiss me. What? Yang flinched away, ears ringing. Simple no would have worked. What? Meaningless sounds tumbled from Weiss's mouth as her eyes bugged out at the blonde. Weiss raised a brow at her, massaging her stinging ears. It was just a thought, a quick kiss to see if you were comfortable with the girl. Weiss stumbled over her words for a reply. But me? Kiss you? Yang frowned a bit at her tone. Well, you don't gotta say it like that. Weiss's cheek tinted. Sorry, I didn't mean like that. I just. You want to kiss me? The blonde paused at the nervous quiver in her voice. Well, yeah, I guess. Why, something wrong with that? The red darkened. No, not really, but why? Yang tilted her head, much like Ruby would. Why not? I just thought it would be a way to help you out. Weiss frowned. How would you kissing me help me in any way? Makes sense to me. You don't like it, you don't like it. But if you do, Yang shrugged. What, is there something wrong with me? I could ask Ruby if that makes you more comfortable. Weiss blushed deeper at the thought, pushing down the flustered feeling building inside her. No, it's not you. Then what? The thought of kissing a girl? No, it's. Weiss hesitated Weiss hesitated, then sighed. It's because I've never kissed anyone before. Ever. Yang blinked. Ever? Ever. Oh. Yang said, turning away. She drew the figure on her knee. Awkward, she mumbled. The room went silent. Weiss's mind was a jumbled mess as she shifted through her thoughts. Kiss Yang? Preposterous. The very idea. Although, no, it wouldn't work. Though it might. What if I don't like it? What if I do? What would that mean? Ah, ridiculous. How could one kiss mean anything anyway? It's not as if I feel anything for her. She glanced over at Yang. Then Yang glanced back. She quickly turned away. Well, that's not entirely true. She's kind, if abrasive. She's protective, if a bit smothering. She thought of the arm punches, the fist bumps, the one-arm hugs Yang would subject her on. Sorry, the one-armed hugs Yang would subject her to on occasion, usually right out of the blue for no apparent reason. Her lips quirk a bit. She's affectionate, in her own way, and accepting, trusting. Her eyes flicked to Yang, to her lips. Maybe just once. Well, Yang said suddenly as she moved to stand up, startling Weiss from her thought. Sorry I wasn't much help to you, Snowflake. I better get back in there before Blake's get restless. She was almost to her field. Wait! Yang froze, looking down. She saw Weiss's hand wrapped around her wrist, the heiress holding her head down so she couldn't see her eyes. Weiss? Yang questioned. Just one kiss? The word was so soft Yang almost missed them. A smile slowly spread across her face. Yeah, just one. And if I say I don't like it, you'll stop? Yang slowly sat back down, moving her arms so Weiss's hand fell into her own. Just say the word. Weiss swallowed nervously, turning to Yang. Her eyes shined with trepidation. How exactly? Yang laughed softly. Just lean forward a bit. I'll do the rest. Weiss hesitated before leaning forward slowly, ever so slowly, closing her eyes. Soft. That was surprising. Everything about Yang screamed strength, but when their lips connected, all Weiss could think was about how soft Yang's lips were against her own, soft and warm. Well, it doesn't feel bad, Weiss thought as Yang moved her lips against her. She pressed forward slightly against the blonde. Actually, it's rather Nice. Yang let out a small chuckle when she felt Wise lean further into the kiss. I wonder if Wise tensed when she felt something poke slightly at her lips. It took her a second to realize it was Yang's tongue, asking for entry. Nerves almost made her break the kiss, but after a moment, curiosity won out. Wise parted her lips slightly, and Yang's tongue darted in, gently brushing against her own. Hesitantly, Wise pushed back, Yang acting in kind. Second ticked past as Wise lost herself. By some mutual understanding, they broke apart slowly, Wise only then noticing the heat in her cheeks. She opened her eyes, finding Yang smiling softly at her. Well? She asked quietly. Wise stared back before clearing her throat awkwardly. Well, it wasn't unpleasant. Yang raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. After a moment, Wise relented. Okay, it felt nice. Very nice, she said, her blush deepening. Yang's smile grew. Good to know. She glanced at the door. I wasn't kidding, you know. Blake's still raring to go, and I don't really like the idea of Ruby dealing with all that on her own. Wise blinked, suddenly remembering the whole reason this had started in the first place. She nodded slowly. Yeah, you should probably check back in. Yang gave her a long look before getting to her feet. Towel still wrapped around her. She put her hand on the doorknob but stopped. She turned to Wise. You know, the offer still stands. Excuse me, I think now it's the turn of the dog to do something forbidden. I'll be right back. The dog was stealing the cat's treat. I had to yell a bit. Where was I? Let me just find back my line. Yeah, right here. She put her hand on the doorknob but stopped. She turned to Weiss. You know, the offer still stands. Weiss looked up at her, fully aware of what she was asking. She hesitated. Kissing is one thing, but do I really want to? Could we stop? She asked nervously. If I don't like it. Yang just nodded, understanding. If you feel uncomfortable, Weiss, you just gotta say no. I don't want to force you to do something you don't want to do. Weiss still hesitated. She felt nervous. No, if she was honest with herself, she felt scared. She was so far out of her element, so out of her depth. She had no idea what would happen, and she hated that. But she stared into Yang's eyes, looking back at her with warmth and acceptance, so much in those lavender's orb that she never received from anybody. I trust her. Weiss was surprised by how unexpected that revelation was. Hesitantly, Weiss raised her arm toward Yang. Yang's smile grew even further, pulling the small girl to her feet. I'm trusting you, she said softly. I know, Souffle. I know, Snowflake. Oh, bit of water, and a chapter. The next one, the last one for today. And I will do more of them in a week after that. Sorry about that. Okay, let's get back into it for the last chapter today. If I can do, well, how long has it been? It's been a bit more than 2 hours. So if I do 2 hour and a half each Saturday, I will do about 6 chapter each time, more or less. Okay, good to know. All right, chapter 6. Good morning. And that's pretty much it. After that, we just kinda Yang made a wave motion with her arm. Good with the flow. Blake smiled at Yang as Yang finished speaking. She looked at the sleeping heiress, reaching over to brush a strand of hair from her face. So, did she like it? Yang smirked. Oh yeah. Took her a little while to get comfortable though. Weirdly, I think Ruby being there helped her a bit. Blake nodded, smiling back at Yang. I think that was really sweet, you helping Wise get through that. Yang blushed a little at the praise. Oh, yeah, well, I think she just needed someone to vent to. Though she tried to laugh it off, she raised her arm a bit, resting her hand on Wise's head, fingers over white hair. Really? Blake said, an idea forming at the rather tender act. Sure there wasn't any other reason? She asked with a smirk of her own. Yang sent a joking glare, well aware of what Blake was going for. Yeah, actually, it was all an elaborate ploy to get into Princess Pants. You cracked the case, Sherlock Blake, she said sarcastically. Blake giggled a bit. She glanced toward the wall clock. 9 a.m. So, should we wake up Ruby and Wise? Yang thought about it for a minute, then shook her head. Nah, let them sleep. Besides, it's Saturday. Perfect day to laze around in bed. Blake rolled her eyes at her partner's laziness. Although, with the way the sunlight was shining on her and with how warm and soft Ruby was on top of her. Works for me, Blake said, closing her eyes, feeling like she should go back to sleep herself. She relaxed for about 10 minutes, just listening to Wise and Ruby breathe softly in their sleep, her ears twitching whenever one of them gave a particularly loud snore. After a while, though, she started to get the feeling she was being watched. Something's wrong, Wise? Yang? She asked, her eyes sliding open. Yang blushed at being caught. Sorry, it's just... Her eyes drifted to the top of Blake's hand. Yang blushed in kind. It was only then that she realized that, aside from the night before, this was the first time Yang had seen her ears. Actually, this was the first time anyone outside the White Fang had seen her ears. Now that her hit had passed, there was nothing occupying her thoughts, nothing to distract her. If anything, it made her feel even more naked than she already was. Yes? She asked hesitantly, feeling wary. Yang glanced up at her ears again, before giving an awkward smile. Can I? She asked softly. Blake swallowed. If it had been anyone else, she would have taken that question as an insult. Her ears were not some novelty to be gawked at and fussed over. That kind of attitude made her blood boil fairly often. But this was Yang. Blake knew her, how she thought. There was no ulterior motive, no underhanded reason, just simple curiosity. With a little trepidation, Blake nodded her head. Nodding back, Yang raised her free hand, gently cupping Blake's ear. Soft, she whispered as her finger rubbed lightly against fur. She carefully traced her finger from the tip of Blake's ears to the base, feeling the subtle shift from fur to hair. Blake tensed at her touch. It had been so long since someone had touched her ear so gently, haze of heat notwithstanding. A small shiver went down her spine as Yang trailed over the point where her ears met her skull. The rumble in her chest was sudden, involuntary. With a sharp intake of breath, she stopped, her eyes wide as she flinched away from Yang's touch. Yang pulled her hand back, worried. Did I do something wrong? She asked. Blake looked at her in shock. Yang thought she did something wrong. Blake was the one who. Did she just not hear what Blake did? The very obvious, very unhuman sound she had made? Didn't I just purr? Yeah. Yang cocked her head to the side. Isn't that a good thing? I thought that meant that you were happy. Blake felt a blush forming. Yes, technically, but she gave Yang an odd look. You don't think that's weird? Yang just stared back, confused. Should I? Is purring a bad thing? Blake was utterly confused. You don't think it is? Yang raised an eyebrow, baffled. Why would I? You were purring a lot last night, among other things. Blake's eyes widened. I was? She whispered, mortified. Pretty much every time we took a break, you'd curl up next to one of us and start purring. We thought it just meant you were happy. She frowned. Were we wrong? Blake looked back into her questioning eyes, a slurry of emotion forming in her guts. It's complicated. Yang's eyes narrowed slightly, a rebuttal on her lips. Blake spoke quickly to us to explain. Look, it's just I haven't let myself purr in a long time. She swallowed. I'm not really comfortable talking about it. Yang's look grew sympathetic. She was quiet before asking, do you want to, though? Blake glanced away. After debating in her head, she gave Yang a long look. I'm not really supposed to. Yang furrowed her brow. Why? Is that a fungus thing? Blake gave a stiff nod. Fungus have been trying to prove to humans that we are no different from them for decades, but we are, in certain way. Purring, growling, barking, just things that we instinctively want to do, but when we act like animals, she said the word with disdain, we tend to get treated as such. Yang's eyes widened. Blake, you know I'd never. Blake shook her head at her. I know you wouldn't. She looked down at the sleeping Ruby, then over to Wise. None of you would, and she smiled at Yang. You have no idea how happy that makes me. Yang smiled back. No problem. She paused, her voice growing softer. You know, you purring wouldn't change that. Blake tensed at the thought. She knew Yang was telling the truth, and hell, after last night, purring seemed rather tame by comparison. Still, Blake took a breath, forcing herself to relax. She looked nervously at Yang. Could you scratch my ears again? She asked, blushing. Yang gave her a small smirk. She reached up gently, just barely ghosting a nail of her skin. Blake practically melted at the touch. She leaned toward Yang, prompting the blonde to scratch harder. Her lips quirked at the feeling. Deep in her chest, Blake could feel the trembling sensation building. For a few seconds, she held back, but Yang's word played in her head. With a shaky breath, Blake purposefully let go for the first time in 10 years. Yang's grin grew as Blake's rumbling filled the room. A look of contentment formed on the furnace's face, a true smile stretching across her lips. Blake had been so tense and guarded the last few months. Even after getting outed, she always distanced herself from the rest of them. Even though Yang was starting to suspect Blake didn't. Oh wow. If I'm mixing the names, we'll never get there. Sorry, I'm gonna reread that. Blake had been so tense and guarded the last few months. Even after getting outed, she always distanced herself from the rest of them. Even though Yang was starting to suspect, Blake didn't even realize she was doing it. It made Yang feel like a bit of a failure that Blake couldn't even let herself trust her own partner. Seeing Blake so undeniably, honestly happy put a warm, fuzzy feeling in Yang's chest. First Weiss, no Blake. If this huntress thing doesn't work out, maybe I should be a counselor. Nah, too boring. Blake's Blake's purring held steady as the minutes ticked by. Yang was starting to think that she could stay there all day, listening to Blake purr and Weiss snore on top of her. Huh? What's that? Yang stopped scratching at the noise, causing Blake to pause in her purring. Their attention was drawn to the head of red-tipped hair raising itself from Blake's chest. Silver eyes blinked sleepily up at Blake's surprised face. Ruby smiled. Oh, morning, Blake. Blake recovered quickly. Good morning, Ruby. Ruby tilted her head slightly. Are you feeling better now? Blake smiled softly at the concern in her voice. Much, Ruby, thank you. Ruby just nodded happily back. That's good. And with that, her head fell back into Blake's chest, eyes closed. No, Blake tilted her head. Did she just fall back asleep? Yanks nodded. No, she just wants us to think she did. Don't you, sleepyhead? A single silver orb slid open at the blonde. Ruby's only response was to stick her tongue out before closing her eyes again. Blake and Yang chuckled at her childishness. Childishness. Okay, how do you even pronounce that? It's impossible. Childishness. I think that was it. Nice. Blake turned her gaze toward the last still sleeping team member. Think we should wake Weiss up now? Yang looked down at the girl in question. Yeah, we are 3 for 4. Might as well complete the set. She gave Weiss' shoulder a small shake. Weiss? Oh, Weiss? She whispered. The heiress groaned a little, but stayed asleep. Yang shook a little harder. Come on, Weiss. I know I'm comfy and all, but it's time to wake up. It's wake up time. Wake up. It's wake up time. Sorry. Oh, perfect. This time worked. Weiss gave a groan of discontentment. Yang, she muttered half asleep as she pushed herself up, lifting her head from what she thought were pillows. What's so important? She cut herself off as she opened her eyes, head still down. Those weren't pillows. She slowly looked up, finding Yang's smirking face inches from her, laughter in her eyes. Morning, Snowflake. Weiss's face tinted pink, the color growing deeper and deeper as the rush of memories came flooding back. Ruby opened her eyes again at the lack of response. Is Weiss okay? She's turning really red. Yang stifled a snort, glancing briefly at Ruby. I think her brain's melting. Weiss's eyes slowly panned across the bed, Blake stifling a laugh as her face grew redder and redder as she observed Blake and Ruby's position and their lack of clothing. The topper was when she slowly looked down at herself, and the look on her face as saw nothing but skin. She tilted her head up mechanically. Yang? Yeah? We're naked. Yep. And we all? Uh-huh. Oh. Oh. Oh dear. Weiss's head slowly lowered itself down onto Yang's chest, her face a deeper shade of red than Ruby's cloak. Ruby, Weiss's face was almost disturbingly blank as she just stared off into nothingness. Yang chuckled. And we broke her. Ruby, however, looked concerned. Weiss? She asked, slightly poking Weiss's cheek. You okay? Blake grew slightly worried when Weiss's only reaction was to dimly focus on Ruby's eyes, but then Weiss closed her eyes, taking and releasing a deep breath. She opened her blue eyes, the making of a smile on her lips. I'm fine, Ruby, just... Wow. She let out a nervous... I can't talk anymore. This is too hard. 6th chapter was too much. Well, I started, I'm not finished. I'm fine, Ruby, just... Wow. She let out a nervous laugh. We actually did that, didn't we? Yep, Yang said, brushing a strand of hair from Weiss's eyes. When Weiss looked up at her, she smirked. Pretty fun, wasn't it? Weiss rolled her eyes a little, though the smile never left her face. That's one word for it, I suppose. So, can I say I told you so now? Weiss lightly punched her shoulder. Don't push it, she grumbled, still smiling. Then her eyes trailed back to Blake. Are you back to normal, Blake? She asked awkwardly. Blake nodded, a never-ending grin widening. Yes, Weiss, I feel much better. In fact, she let out a happy sigh, her head falling back into the pillow. I feel wonderful. Yang laughed at the look of contentment of Blake's face. Whoa, girls, we are good. Oh, hush, Weiss chided, slapping Yang's arm, though she did feel rather accomplished at seeing Blake's happiness. She looked at the clock, almost 10. We should probably get up soon. Oh, come on, Weiss, it's a weekend, Yang pouted. Blake resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Sorry, Yang, but I agree. Nice as this is, there are other things I want to do today. Yang shot her a half-hearted glare. Traitor, she groaned. She turned her attention to her sister, who had once again closed her eyes. Rube, I think we've been beat. Get up. Ruby opened a single eye and stared at Yang for a second. No, she said tersely, reaching behind her and pulling the cover over her head. Yang rolled her eyes. Ruby, get up. No. Ruby, get off of Blake. But she's warm. Ruby whined, eliciting a blush from Blake. Yang deadpanned at the cover bundle lying on top of her partner. She looked at Weiss, then at Blake. She smirked and promptly shoved Ruby off of the bed. What? Yang chuckled, only to start laughing as Weiss frantically tried to cover herself as the sheet had followed Ruby right off the bed. She shot Yang a glare. Oh, lighten up, princess. Ain't like we didn't see everything last night. Weiss's only response was to glare harder, blush deepening. Ruby propped up, finally untangling herself from the sheet. Yang, no affair. Yang's just laughed. All's fair in love and war, sis. Ruby pouted. Then she smirked. Well, in that case, dibs on the first shower. Wait, what? In a blur of red, Ruby flashed to the dresser, then the closet, then to the bathroom door. She stopped after opening the door, a bundle of clothes in her arms, giving the tree a mock salute. Blake pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a laugh at the leader's antics. But then, just as Ruby was about to enter the bathroom, Blake noticed something strange. For just a second, she could have sworn she saw something red and purple on Ruby's left shoulder. Her eyes widened. Was that... Ruby disappeared into the bathroom, the click of the lock echoing in the dorm. Oh, she did not just do that, Yang yelled as she pushed herself up. Weiss sliding off her to the side. Blake leaned back as Yang climbed over her, watching as the blonde ran to the door and tried to open it. What? I thought I broke this last night. Ruby, today's my day to show her first. I can't hear you, liar! And just like that, we're back to normal, Wise grumbled, pulling the sheet up from the floor to cover herself. As she leaned down, her hair fell to her right side. Blake looked at her and gasped. No. Wise froze at the sound, looking to Blake in alarm. Blake, what's wrong? Blake said nothing, just staring at Wise with wide eyes. Confused, Wise followed her gaze. What the? On Wise's left shoulder, just beside her collarbone, was a spot of deep purple 2 inches across, around which was a ring of what were unmistakably teeth marks. Wise tentatively placed her hand over the mark, her face scrunched up in confusion as she ran her fingers over the raised edge of the bites. When? Whoa, Yang said, having noticed the pair's reaction. Wise looked over at her, eyes widening as she pointed. Yang, you have one too. Blake's head snapped toward Yang's right as the blonde looked down. Sure enough, Yang had a twin of Wise's mark in the same exact spot. No, no, no. Hey guys, Ruby called uncertainly from the bathroom. Do any of you have a bite mark on your shoulder? Yang looked toward the room. Yeah, Ruby, we do too. Then she raised an eyebrow as her eyes panned over to Blake. Except Blake, she added. Oh, okay. Shh, Ruby went silent as the shower turned on. Blake just stared dumbly at the marks, head swiveling between Weiss and Yang. I don't. Yang let out a laugh, suddenly smirking. I didn't peg you for a biter, Blake. Blake's cheek tinted horribly, still turned. Yang giggled. Relax, Blake. It's just a little bit. It's just a little love bite. It doesn't even hurt. Expression then turns thoughtful. Weird though. I don't really remember this from last night. Blake swallowed, Weiss shooting her a look. Weiss then grumbled a bit about how she'd hoped she could hide the bite with a cloth collar. Blake mustered up a smile, her ears tilting back slightly. Sorry, must have been a heat of the moment thing. Yang blinked at her before laughing. Dang, you stole my joke! Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Someone came home. Stole my joke. Blake laughed back at Weiss, rolled her eyes. You and your puns, she muttered as she got off the bed, walking to the dress holding the sheets around her. So, what do you think the lockdown was for last night? I don't know. They'll probably tell us later today. Blake held her smile as she watched Yang and Weiss get ready for the day, catching the shirt and pants that Yang suddenly threw away. As she slipped them on, however, she kept her eyes glued to the two bites on her friends, contrasting against their clear skin, mocking her. On the outside, she smiled. On the outside, she panicked. This
This isn't right. It's it's just like Yang said, just a few love bites, nothing more. They're not. They can't be. I couldn't have given them. With growing dread, Blake flared her aura slightly, just a tiny pulse that no one would notice. Her stomach dropped when both marks faintly glowed purple. Yang scratching absently at hers. A mate's mark. Professor Ospin's office. Professor Ospin frowned down at the scroll in his hand. On his desk sat a cup of coffee, cold and forgotten. He looked up across the desk. Glinda Goodwitch stood on the other side, looking grim. You're sure this is all the information they took? Yes, sir, she said, frowning. Ospin let out a sigh, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Whoever broke in is long gone by now. Lift the lockdown. Goodwitch nodded, spinning on her heels as she left the room. Ospin looked at his window at the morning sun rising in the skies. Who are you? He asked himself, looking toward the city of Vale off in the distance. Unknown location. He watched the video for the 100th time. Little Red zipping across the docks, the cat Faunus fighting off White Fangs like it was second nature, Monkey Boy making mockery of his effort, and the orange-haired girl. What kind of kids can shoot laser beams? Roman threw down his scroll in frustration. Things used to be easy. Run around town, smash and grab, make a quick buck. And the White Fang had seemed like such a good idea too. More people, more hands, more money in his pocket, more guns if things went south. Perfect. And then Little Red and a freak parade showed up. Roman slumped into his rolly chair, rubbing at his nose. He glanced at the clock. She should be here by now. Where the heck? Creak. Roman's head popped up, smiling slyly as his favorite partner in crime walked through the door, clad in bright pink and dark bronze, with a parasol perched on her shoulder. Neo! He called out happily. My favorite little thief/hit girl. How did you get it? Neo rolled her mismatched eyes at his overreacting. She reached into her blouse and fished out a flash drive. Roman's grin grew. I knew you could do it. Now come to Papa. He made a grab for the flash drive, only for Neo to pull it away, holding it over her head. She raised an eyebrow before rubbing her fingers together with her other hands. Roman pouted but dug into his pocket. Oh, fine, he grumbled before tossing a yellow packet at Neo. Neo caught it easily, opening it. She pulled out a stack of lianes, flipping through it lazily. Roman rolled his eyes. It's all there, 20,000 just like always, you little bloodsucker. Neo smirked at him, tossing over the flash drive. She then sighed as he fumbled his catch, nearly dropping it. Finally, with a cry of victory, he caught it, excitedly scooping up his scroll as he plugged the drive in. He smiled gleefully at all the new information pouring across his screen. Name, pictures, weapons, skills, team names, everything he could ever hope to know about the students of Beacon Academy. Okay, Little Red, he said to himself, just who are you? And this is where we will leave things for today. I will do that again in exactly a week from now. And it should be, if all things are organized correctly. Give me just a second to tell you. 3 p.m. at my time, but I'm not sure which it is for you. Channel. Create a board. Just nope, not here. giving you that information in just a second. If I find it. Gosh, where was it? I remember touching it just a second ago. That's right. 3 p.m. GTM +1. That's when I'll do this. Normally. Can't exactly guarantee that, but oh well. Anyway, it was a pleasure to read. It was a pleasure to work at my voice a bit. I have a tired voice now. It really is time to stop. But yeah, I hope we will all get to enjoy this next time in a week. Until then, toodles!